In April 2010, Michael and Christine Barnett adopted a 6-year-old Ukrainian orphan through an adoption agency in Florida. In their desire to expand their family, they saw providing a loving home to a child in need as the ideal way to grow their existing family. Soon after welcoming the 6-year-old into their home, they began experiencing a series of unusual occurrences. Before long, these peculiar incidents would prompt the couple to believe that the girl they had taken into their home was not truly a child, but in fact an adult woman posing as one. The Barnetts' dream to expand their family would quickly turn into a nightmare as they came to realize that Natalia Grace may be a violent and threatening presence in their home. Hi everyone, and welcome to Crime Corner with Jen. For those of you who don't know, my name is Jen and I talk about true crime cases on this channel. Today, we're going to be diving into a very perplexing and very controversial story, and that is the story of Natalia Grace. This has been one of the most interesting cases I've ever looked into, and this is a mystery that reads like a true thriller. Fans of creepy movies like the 2009 horror film The Orphan will be stunned by the striking similarities between that fictional story and the haunting true account of Natalia Grace. Except this disturbing drama actually unfolded in real life. In 2010, Michael and Christine Barnett were living a seemingly fantastic life. They were raising their 3 sons in a beautiful new home that they had just purchased in Indiana and had hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank. Things were really settling into place for the family, and they decided that to make it even more of a dream, they wanted to grow their happy little family. Feeling tremendously blessed by their comfortable home life, the Barnetts wanted to share their good fortune by opening their home to a child in need of one. This ultimately led the couple to research various adoption agencies, eventually choosing to go with one based in Florida. The agency would quickly introduce the Barnetts to a 6-year-old Ukrainian orphan girl by the name of Natalia Grace. Before moving forward with the details of this case, I do want to let you guys know that there is a 3-part docuseries released for this case through Investigation Discovery, and it's called The Curious Case of Natalia Grace. And while the docuseries is a really good source of information in terms of the general gist of what happened with the Barnetts and with Natalia, I do want to just state that again, like, this is only, the docuseries is only their side of the story. It's the Barnett side of the story. It doesn't cover Natalia's side of the story, and I think it's really important here to just keep that in mind because this case still has so much that's unknown to it, and a lot of information is very conflicting or hasn't been confirmed. So just keep that in mind, that there are 2 sides of every story, and the docuseries is only covering one side. Now, I will also be referring back to the documentary quite a bit in this video, just because I will be speaking about the Barnetts' side of their story. So according to Michael, after the agency had introduced Natalia to the Barnetts were apparently only given 24 hours to decide whether they wanted to proceed with the adoption or not. The agency had told the Barnetts that Natalia suffered from severe dwarfism and that the couple had to sign the papers within 24 hours, otherwise Natalia would go straight into foster care. For those of you who might not be super familiar with dwarfism, it's a medical condition that can stunt your growth and your aging process. And this is usually caused by genetics or in some cases by other medical conditions. And in Natalia's case, she did have a very rare and very specific type of dwarfism that for the life of me, I just cannot pronounce, so I will put it up here on the screen. Natalia's rare form of dwarfism can cause skeletal abnormalities as well as issues with hearing and vision. According to the birth certificate that the Barnetts received from the adoption agency, Natalia was born on September 4th, 2003, so this would make her 6 years old at the time time of the adoption. When the Barnetts first met Natalia, she was barely 3 feet tall, and given her condition, the Barnetts believed that it would be preferable for Natalia to go home with them and to be adopted by them rather than having to fend for herself in the foster care system. The foster care system can pose challenges for children with medical conditions or disabilities, and many such children end up not being able to find permanent homes and just generally not living the best life. Natalia had also already bounced around different families at this point, and she had been surrendered due to various reasons. Some of those reasons were due to the families not being able to provide her with the medical care that she needed, or it just wasn't a good fit. So because of this, the Barnetts decided that due to Natalia's condition, they would be able to provide Natalia with a much better home life than the foster care system. They would decide to go ahead and sign the papers and would welcome Natalia Grace home on April 26, 2010. However, it didn't take long for the couple to encounter a series of happenings that would prompt them to question Natalia's real age. A few months after Natalia joined the Barnetts, the family would return home from a trip to Disneyland. After a whole day out and about, Christine would prepare a bath for Natalia, and when she was helping Natalia with her bath, she noticed that her 6-year-old child had hair in places that a child her age should not have. And according to Christine, this wasn't just a few strands of hair. This was full-on proper adult hair. I won't go into specifics regarding where that hair was, but all I'll say is that it was in a place where a child wouldn't typically have hair.
When Christine was giving our new daughter a bath, she shouted to me, "Michael," and it wasn't just a shout, it was one of those tones of voice where you knew something was very wrong. I came rushing into the bathroom, and I found Christine white as a ghost. She was truly shaken. I had no idea why, and I said, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And Christine simply said, "Look." And I looked down, and Natalia, at age 6, had full hair.
This was the very first strange experience that they would encounter with Natalia, but the family tried to move forward and to forget about it ever happening. However, soon after this incident, Christine would find blood stains on Natalia's bed sheets. Christine would come to the realization that the blood stains were coming from Natalia because Natalia had started menstruating. When she would confront Natalia about this, she would discover that Natalia had been hiding this from her family for months now. On one occasion, the Barnetts would take Natalia to go and do a meetup with another girl who was her same age and who had the same medical disorder as Natalia. And the Barnetts were shocked to see the stark contrast between Natalia and the other 6-year-old girl. The two girls had the same disorder and were supposedly the same age, which was 6 years old, but Natalia's vocabulary and bone structure were much more advanced than her playmate.
So after that day, when we had the play date with another girl with the exact same kind of dwarfism that Natalia had, and supposedly at the exact same age, you knew immediately these two people were nowhere near the same level of maturity.
Now, as more time progressed, the Barnetts noticed that Natalia would continue to exhibit strange behaviors. For example, on multiple occasions when the Barnetts were taking Natalia somewhere and they were all in the car, Natalia would start using the bathroom inside the car. And when I say start using the bathroom, I mean going number 1 and number 2. And she would often just take whatever was coming out of her and start smearing it all over the windows of the vehicle. Michael would also state in the documentary that during their car rides while out in public, Natalia would open the car door, the passenger side of the door, and she would try to fling herself out for attention. The Barnetts came to believe that Natalia was intentionally exhibiting these strange behaviors as an attempt to perpetuate the perception that she was a young, helpless child. Michael claims that Natalia would take knives from their kitchen block and would start hoarding these knives away in her bedroom. There was one incident where he would wake up in the middle of the night because he felt like he was being watched, and he would be shocked to find Natalia standing at the foot of his bed holding a knife. She then supposedly said to him, "I'm going to kill you in your sleep." Michael also claims in the documentary that Natalia had tried to take Christine's life on multiple occasions. Natalia had apparently tried to poison Christine's coffee, and during a hike with just Christine and Natalia, Natalia apparently pushed Christine up against an electric fence. She would also supposedly threaten to harm her brothers. Michael and Christine's eldest son, Jacob Barnett, would also be present in the docuseries, and Jacob would state that he never ever felt safe around Natalia. He was genuinely scared of what Natalia would do to him and to his family, and just generally always felt very uneasy whenever she was around. Michael and Christine were convinced that Natalia was a threatening presence in their household, and this would prompt them to take her in to see a psychiatrist. They had expected that maybe Natalia was schizophrenic, but when the therapist told them that she was a sociopath, they were really shocked by this diagnosis. This diagnosis would lead to Natalia being admitted into a state mental hospital in 2012. In the documentary, staff from the hospital would come forward to state that Natalia had been released shortly after being admitted because she was making the other male patients feel very, very uncomfortable. The staff members who came forward to speak about this did do so anonymously, and I can assume it's because of patient confidentiality, and they're actually not supposed to be speaking about this. So they did do so under the condition that they didn't reveal their identity. The staff members would go on to elaborate that Natalia would make the male patients feel uncomfortable by harassing them with inappropriate remarks, and they just weren't able to get her to stop. So they did tell the Barnetts that they had to release her because they weren't able to provide her with any more services. According to psychiatric testing, it was revealed that Natalia had illnesses that were consistent with someone who was in their late teens or early 20s. So at this point, the Barnetts were convinced that Natalia was not a 6-year-old girl. They believed that her birth certificate had been forged and that she was an adult woman posing as a child. In 2012, the Barnetts would petition the Marion County Court to change Natalia's birth records. This petition went through successfully, and her birth date was changed from September 4th, 2003 to September 4th, 1989. This would make her 23 years old at the time of the new court-ordered birth certificate. Following this change, the Barnetts did decide that they weren't comfortable with Natalia living under their household anymore, so they would decide to find her separate housing. Initially, the Barnetts decided to set Natalia up in a state-run home through a program called Aspire Living. But shortly after living there, just for a few months, the Barnetts would claim that Natalia had been evicted. So because of this, they decided to relocate her to an apartment complex in Lafayette, Indiana. The Barnetts would also pay Natalia's first year of rent, and in addition to that rent, they would also help set her up with Social Security, disability aid, food stamps, and Medicaid. I watched an interview where Natalia would speak about this, and she would state that the Barnetts had told her to tell people that she was in her 20s, like specifically 22 if she was ever asked. So that's why she went around introducing herself to her neighbors as a 22-year-old woman. Natalia even successfully befriended some of her neighbors, but those friendships would be short-lived. Apparently, many of the neighbors began to feel uncomfortable around Natalia. Her neighbors, Sue McKellen and Toby and Melanie Miles, would state in an interview that Natalia made them feel very uncomfortable because she kept showing up to their homes unannounced. Her neighbors also added that this behavior, as well as Natalia's concerning pattern of acting inappropriately towards other people, especially young children, made them feel like they could not trust her and that there was just something really off about this woman. Toby Miles even stated that Natalia had once told him flat out that she had tried to Kill, her mom. And during her stay in this apartment complex, Natalia had supposedly made a call to 911 operator stating that she's stalking one of her neighbors and that she didn't want to harm them. However, I have also found reports online that there were neighbors who did successfully befriend Natalia, and they found her to be shy but harmless enough, and they didn't really see any issues with her. So again, there's a lot of conflicting information here, and no one really knows what the truth is. So after Natalia's 1-year lease ended at the apartment, Michael and Christine Barnett would make the decision to move their family up to Canada. When they moved their family up to Canada, they did not include Natalia in the move. Their move was a result of their eldest son, Jacob Barnett, being admitted into a prestigious physics school in Waterloo, Ontario. Apparently, Jacob had been diagnosed with autism, and he has a very, very high IQ, so he's very intelligent. And his parents claimed that this move was so that they could support their son with his education. And this is just where things start to become more complex and more confusing. In the documentary, Michael and Jacob would claim that Christine had grown to become very hostile towards Natalia. She would often mistreat Natalia in order to try and get the truth out from her. There was one incident where the Barnett's neighbors had to call 911 on Christine because Christine had locked Natalia out of their home, trying to force her to tell the family the truth about her age. There seemed to be a lot of chaos going on inside of the Barnett's household, not just from the situation with Natalia, but caused by Christine. Christine was convinced that Natalia was lying to the family about who she really was and how old she really was, and Christine was on a mission to find out the truth by any means possible. This is quite surprising because Christine is an author of a book about nurturing a young autistic genius who is her son Jacob. And in her book, Christine portrays herself as a loving and nurturing mother to her children, especially towards her son who has autism. So the way that she treated Natalia is a really stark contrast to the woman that she portrayed herself to be in her book. Now, when Natalia's case made its way to the public, the Barnetts were really surprised to find themselves in a lot of heat. The apartment complex that Natalia had been housed in Lafayette, Indiana, was described to be a pretty run-down apartment complex and in a pretty rough area of the city. One of Natalia's neighbors, a woman by Kyra Weaver, did state in an interview that she felt like the Barnetts had kind of just thrown Natalia to the wolves and left her to fend for herself alone. Natalia apparently struggled to climb the stairs of her apartment complex to get up to her unit, and because of her size and her height, she wasn't able to reach the top of her kitchen counters or use her washing machine because she wasn't tall enough to reach the top. Other neighbors commented that Natalia lived off of food stamps and instant noodles because she didn't know how to cook. And even if she did know how to cook, she wouldn't be able to do so because she couldn't reach the top of her kitchen counters. And in September 2013, Natalia would be evicted from her apartment because she didn't have money to pay the bills or the rent, and she wasn't receiving any support from the Barnetts anymore. Natalia would be taken in by a couple by the name of Antoine and Cynthia Mons after her eviction in September 2013. Antoine and Cynthia knew one of Natalia's neighbors, and during the eviction process, that neighbor contacted the couple to tell them that there was a woman here or a girl here who was in need of assistance, and just asked the couple to come and speak with her and check her out and see if there was any way they could help her. The couple would go to meet with Natalia and they would take her in, and in 2016 the couple would petition to become Natalia's official legal guardians. However, they did end up withdrawing the petition because the court upheld the ruling that Natalia was an adult and was born in 1989 and not in 2003. So in 2013, when Natalia moved in with Antoine and Cynthia, a social worker was called in and stepped in to work with the authorities to figure out why Natalia had been abandoned and left to fend for herself. Again, the story here is that the Barnetts moved to Canada to support their son in his schooling, but many people believe that they actually made this move to get away from Natalia. And in 2019, Michael and Christine, who would end up providing different accounts of what happened to the authorities, were faced with a series of neglect-related charges. Authorities argued that regardless of Natalia's true age at the time of her abandonment, she depended on her parents for care and support due to her dwarfism. Let me give you guys a short rundown of how the investigation and the trial went down. Well, they moved there in the summer of 2013, but by the fall of 2013, Michael would return to Indiana alone. Christine had stated in a court document that Michael had returned to Indiana due to an incident that impacted the children. However, the exact details of what that incident was not recorded in the documents. The couple would then file for divorce in February of 2014, and I believe it was finalized sometime in July of 2014. According to court records, on June 3, 2010, Natalia was examined by Dr. Riggs at Peyton Manning Children's Hospital in Indianapolis. The evaluation determined that Natalia was approximately 8 years old in 2010. A skeletal survey conducted at the same hospital 2 years later, so in 2012, would estimate Natalia's age to be 11. So if this is true, I haven't seen the documents, by the way, because they have not been released, but if this is true, that means that Natalia's adopted parents had left to Canada and left her to fend for herself in an apartment alone when she was a preteen in 2013. According to some reports, there are court records that state that Michael admitted to the court that he knew that Natalia was a minor when he and his family moved to Canada. Terrence Kennard, who is Michael's attorney, did come out to say that Michael never said such a thing and that these allegations were not true. As for Christine, she stands by the fact that throughout the entire adoption, Natalia was an adult and not a child. She would even make a post on her now deleted Facebook page stating the following: Natalia is and always has been an adult in the time that I knew her, but that did not stop me from always seeking her best interest. Christine even told news outlets, specifically Daily Mail, that she had tried to keep in touch with Natalia after their move to Canada, but it was Natalia who stopped answering their calls, and it was Natalia who disappeared and never made contact with them again. Charges for neglect of a dependent by abandonment were filed against Michael and Christine on September 11th, 2019. After the charges were filed and arrest warrants were issued, Michael would turn himself in to the Tippecanoe County Jail on September 18. Christine would turn herself in separately on September 19. Although the two would be booked in on those days, they would immediately post bond and would be released. They would have their first closed court hearing on October 15th of 2019, in which both would plead not guilty to all charges. And their trial would be scheduled to begin on January 28th, 2020. While they were both waiting for their trial, Christine did ask for the judge's permission to go and await the trial from her Florida home, which was approved. As for Michael, he actually would end up going on the Dr. Oz show to speak about the situation. On the show, he would recount to the host that he and Christine had tried their best to provide Natalia with all the help that she needed, despite her trying to harm Christine and their sons. Michael claimed on TV that Natalia was in fact an adult and not a child, and that she had deceived his entire family by posing as a child. He also stated that if she was really from Ukraine, he found it really strange that she had no Ukrainian accent and didn't remember a single detail of her life in Ukraine. Michael would then go on to note that there were numerous red flags during the adoption process. The first being seeing how rushed the entire process was. Again, the agency gave him and Christine only 24 hours to think about whether or not they wanted to proceed with Natalia after being introduced to Natalia. And the second being the following statement.
We were sitting in a little itty-bitty office room in a strip mall, and next thing you know, the door opens, and Natalia comes running in, smiling ear to ear, saying, "Mommy, Daddy, Mommy, Daddy, Mommy, Daddy." You know, she was just given up for adoption by her old family 5 minutes before that. We should have recognized that there's no 6-year-old on the planet that would be happy in this situation.
He then also told the host that they had taken Natalia in for a psych evaluation, and that Natalia had told the therapist straight up that she was trying to kill Christine. In his own words, he would state, "While at the stress center, she was documenting, she was telling doctors, she was telling therapists, she was writing down on her notepad, 'Not only am I trying to kill Christine, but I'm going to kill the brothers too. Here's how I'm going to do it. Here's what I'm going to do with their bodies.'" And on October 28th, 2019, the judge would issue a gag order pertaining to prosecutors, defense attorneys, as well as Michael and Christine. This gag order, just weeks later, would be extended to Natalia, and then in November of 2019, it would be extended to Cynthia and Antoine Mons. For those of you who aren't familiar with a gag order is essentially a legal order that requires an individual or individuals to refrain from making public comments about the case. I believe that the extent of what can or cannot be said does depend on the type of order that is issued. But in this particular case, I believe the gag order bans anybody involved in this case to speak negatively, publicly, about anybody involved in the case. It also forbids people involved in the case from vouching against Natalia or Christine and Michael. They're also not allowed to share medical, mental, or educational reports or police reports, videos, or recordings with the public. However, in November 2019, Natalia would go onto the Dr. Phil show to give her side of the story. Before this, she had not spoken out whatsoever, so she wanted to take the opportunity to go on the show and to set the record straight. On the show, Dr. Phil would ask her straight up whether she had scammed the Barnetts and whether all the accusations that had been made against her were true.
They say that you scammed them, that you lied about your age and came over here and terrorized them.
It's not true at all.
Antoine and Cynthia, who also went onto the Dr. Phil show with Natalia, would also give their own statements. Antoine would state that they think Christine had tried to discredit Natalia by saying that she was mentally unstable and had tried to reach her because of the Barnetts' unwillingness to actually provide Natalia with the proper care that she needed due to her dwarfism. They also claim on the show that Natalia has shown no signs of mental illness since being with them and hasn't even started her menstrual cycle. And in December 2019, Michael and Christine would be faced with 4 additional charges. These charges were neglect of a dependent resulting in bodily injury. Prosecutors stated that Natalia was not given proper medical care for her condition, which required surgeries, and this resulted in Natalia being in physical pain on top of her having to fend for herself after she was abandoned. According to court records, the Barnetts were fully aware of the surgeries that Natalia needed, but they failed to provide her with the medical attention that she needed in a timely manner. An affidavit would also be presented by the prosecutors during the trials that included dental records from 2011 and 2012 that would cast doubts on the Barnetts' accusations against Natalia. The dental records indicate that Natalia was about 8 years old in 2011 and she was about 9 years old in 2012. In August 2020, Christine's defense team did file a motion to get the 4 new charges against her dropped, and she was surprisingly successful. Remember earlier how I told you guys that Michael and Christine had petitioned to get Natalia's birth certificates or birth records changed. Well, because they were successful in doing so back then, and they had filed the petition in Marion County and the trial was happening in Tippecanoe County, the judge for the case stated that the Tippecanoe Superior Court did not have the authority to undo the birth certificate change. This means that all charges of neglect that relate to Natalia's age as like a minor were all obsolete. The prosecutors had even tracked down Natalia's birth mother, a Ukrainian woman named Anna Gava. Anna had given Natalia up for adoption because she was a single mother and she wasn't able to provide Natalia with the proper care that she needed, so she did have to give Natalia up at the time of her birth. Anna and the Ukrainian court confirmed that Natalia was born on September 4th, 2003. Despite all of this, the judge stated that if the prosecutors alleged that the neglect of a dependent is based on Natalia's age, then the charges against Christine would be dismissed. But the charges would be valid if the charges alleged the neglect was based on Natalia's disability. And because Michael's defense team did not file for the same motion as Christine's at the same time, he would only end up receiving the same ruling 2 weeks later after his defense team decided to move ahead with the same tactic. Christine and Michael did get into a little bit of trouble with the court for potentially violating the gag order that was issued in October. Christine was posting a number of negative things about Natalia on her social media channels, which have now been deleted. In those posts, she stated over and over again how Natalia had conned them and had ruined their lives and made other comments that went against the gag order. Michael was also trying to sell the story to Hulu producers, which the judge was not happy about. However, I don't believe that that contract ever went through because I don't see anything on Hulu about this, so I think that just fell through. However, as mentioned earlier in this video, Michael does end up working with producers from Investigation Discovery to create a 3-part series about this case. Michael was found to be not guilty of all charges in October 2022, and Christine's charges were dropped due to insufficient evidence in March of 2023. So the truth behind Natalia's real age and what really went down in the Barnett's home still remains a mystery. This case just has tons of conflicting information and crazy accusations that have not been proved true or false. So it's really one of those cases where you're left on your own to figure out what really happened and to come to your own conclusions. As of today, Natalia is legally 33 years old, and according to reports, she still resides in Indiana. But it seems like she's found a really happy place in Antoine and Cynthia's family. As for Michael, he has remarried and still resides in Indiana, and Christine has relocated to Florida officially, and they are not on speaking terms. In the documentary, Michael would even go as far as to say that Christine is a walking epitome of evil. Christine did not take part in the documentary. In fact, she and Michael did have a very rough divorce and are definitely not on good terms. And that does bring this case to a close, guys. I am sorry I'm not able to provide you guys with more answers about what really happened. I would also love to know what really happened. Do you guys think that Natalia is innocent, or are the Barnetts really guilty? So please let me know what you guys think really happened. As always, thank you so much for tuning in to this video. I appreciate your support and I look forward to reading your comments. And if you have any case recommendations, please feel free to send them to my email here. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in once again, and I hope to see you guys in my next video. Have a great week ahead and see you soon. Bye.